The idea of being on a ship in the middle of the ocean has always been unsettling to me. Perhaps it's the fear of the unknown, or maybe it's because all of the stories out there of cruises going wrong, sunken ships, ocean deaths. As much as I love the sea and all the wacky creatures inside, it's also one of the scariest places on the planet to me. Aside from unexplored depths of caves and the vastness of the Appalachia, or any mysterious wilderness for that matter. Anyway, what do you get when you take the Titanic and make it a zombie film that you'd expect to see during the height of The Walking Dead's popularity and relevance in pop culture? Well, you'd get the luxury liner arc, the Book of Atlantic, Tango on the Campania, whatever you call this arc. Yes, I am being entirely serious here for those who haven't read or watched this far in Black Butler. Our next story arc in our journey of Black Butler is a thrilling cruise gone wrong story that really ramps up the action. Up until recent years, this arc was the fan favorite arc, and for good reasons. I do want to say it's still among the fan favorites, but I've noticed a lot more love for the Emerald Witch arc these days, but that might just be my personal social circle. Anyway, Ciel and Sebastian have their work cut out for them on this cruise ship, and this is also a huge turning point in the overall plot for the manga, so strap in because there's a lot to unpack. Things pick up where the murder mystery arc left off. Woodley is still maintaining his innocence and the fact that he was framed, but it doesn't matter, because good old Charles Gray sticks his sword straight through Woodley's head. He is very annoyed that he didn't get to knock Ciel down a peg. Phipps reminds him, though, that he was kind of acting without proper thought. The two wonder what the Queen is even thinking, but it's kind of pointless. Her thoughts are above that of a butler, and that's that. Anyway, love that Charles, a man in his mid-20s, is out here beefing with a 13-year-old just for the vibes. Good for him. We then move back to the Phantom Hive Manor, where Sebastian is introducing Snake to the rest of the gang. It's a really cute moment, and Snake's habit of speaking through his snakes does cause a bit of confusion, but Finney seems to like the new animals. Bard is a bit suspicious though, and even goes as far as asking Sebastian if bringing in this stranger is a good idea, but Sebastian reminds them that he could say the same for each and every one of the servants, aside from Tanaka, and that their past really don't matter. The only concern is that if anyone bears their things at Ciel, then Sebastian would just simply kill them. Except he doesn't directly say that, but it's implied with him beheading a fish instead of finishing his sentence. Either way, this seems to make Bard reassess the situation. We then see Ciel, who's reading the paper, and amongst the banter with Sebastian, Ciel seems to be a bit troubled by what's in the paper. A hospital that claims to bring the dead back to life. I won't get too into it, but I do find it really neat how Ciel stares at Sebastian after reading this, almost as if he either wants to ask him if such things are possible, or a cheeky reference to the Book of Murder arc where Sebastian more or less came back from the dead and created miracles. I also think, given where the plot goes after this arc, I'm reading too into this scene, so I'll end my ramblings here. Ending whatever tension that was brewing from the newspaper, Lau comes in, uninvited but not unannounced. Lau brings well wishes and hopes for breakfast. I also find it funny that he looks at Sebastian and is like, "Hey man, didn't you just die? Why are you here?" And then just accepts it and moves on without any explanation. I love you, Lau. There's a bit of speculation on what's going on with the hospital in the newspaper. Lau reveals that he has noticed this hospital is purchasing people on the docks that he is in charge of. All on the black market, of course, because that's not entirely legal to do. The hospital is purchasing a large number of slaves, and his leading theory is that the headlines in the newspaper, resurrecting the dead, is a result of illegal human experimentation. And that cannot go unchecked, especially once it starts becoming polite society's business. Ciel orders Sebastian to look into it, hoping to squash things out before it becomes too big of an issue. He seems a bit stuck on the idea of bringing people back to life, and I know, it is absurd. It is a very wild idea that's been talked about time and time again in media. Countless stories about trying to bring loved ones back from the dead and dealing with the consequences. It's something that narratively never works out. They come back wrong, or the price is too high to pay, or it simply doesn't work at all. I brought some lady's husband back from the dead while playing Baldur's Gate 3, and he ended up just being a literal zombie. The only time it works out is when it needs to work out for a game to continue working, like when you ask Withers in Baldur's Gate 3 to bring one of your companions or friends back to life because you kind of killed them with the fire bolt. I'm so sorry. I eat, sleep, and breathe Baldur's Gate now. Sorry to all of my friends and mutuals on Tumblr seeing all of the Astarion posting. And now we're 3 for 3 for a video that I've either made or been a part of making since Baldur's Gate that brings up the game. What a track record. My point here, though, is that bringing people back from the dead almost never works in fiction. So the idea of someone pulling it off in reality is quite absurd. Ciel has every non-trauma related reason to be bothered and critical about this claim. However, I do find him being stuck on it interesting since we know he's lost a lot, those most dear to him. Ciel is a person whose entire identity has been built on and around his trauma and his unhealthy coping mechanisms. He's living just so that he can get revenge, as some sort of closure on what happened to him and his family. Yes, he's got plenty of things to live for and has created a very nice life for himself, but he'll never feel free to live it until he can gain some kind of closure for what happened. And he's chosen to do that through revenge, and in such a way that his life is effectively over. I think him knowing that in a way he threw his life away makes the idea of what if he could bring people back from the dead kind of bittersweet. If he could bring his family back, what would be the point if he'd be leaving them once again once the contract was fulfilled? This train of thought is equal parts intriguing and depressing, so he laughs it off, calls it absurd. He needs it to not be a possibility, because if it were possible, why couldn't he get his family back? These are all words I'm putting into his mouth, by the way. He's never really said that. I'm just thinking that he probably feels that way. I think sometimes I'm too empathetic towards Ciel, but hey, I'd have a lot less fun reading this manga if I didn't like the main character and couldn't feel for him and his struggles. As soon as Lau leaves, Lizzie shows up. Ciel's house is just a revolving door with all the unexpected guests. Literally, all that's missing is Soma and Agni barging in to hang out. There's a reason to Lizzie's visit, though. She has come to invite Ciel to the family trip, which I really love. Yes, there's the idea that they are betrothed, so it makes sense for Ciel to be invited on family things since her family are set to become his in-laws. But also, that's his aunt and uncle. Those are his cousins. His dad's sister and her family. And when he has no one left, it's a really sweet familial gesture to invite him on their family vacations, because he doesn't really have a family to go on trips with anymore. Uncle Alexis really looked at this sad boy and said, yeah, he's my nephew. He's a part of this family and will be invited on the family vacation whether you like it or not. But nobody disliked that. Everyone approved. What's the trip? A 3-week trip on a cruise to New York in America. Ciel immediately declines, and honestly, me too. That sounds miserable. Who would want to be trapped on a boat like that? Lizzie tries to give him more enticing details. It'll be the maiden voyage of the Campania, the first ever trip, the debut of this new luxury passenger ship. Said to be the most opulent ship in the world. I think everything about that was also said about the Titanic in real life. Probably. Lizzie even adds that Frances, her mother, said Ciel needs to take some time off every once in a while. That boy works too hard. Ciel then declines in the same way I decline being invited to things. I really appreciate the thought, honestly, but he just simply can't. He can't go. It's too long to be away for him, so it's not a good trip to invite him on. Lizzie does seem upset by this, but Ciel offers that a trip nearby would be fine if she ever wanted to do that. He'll go wherever she wants if it's only a few days trip instead of like 3 weeks. This means the world to Lizzie. After Lizzie leaves, yes, it did look like she made the trip out to Ciel's just to tell him he's invited on a vacation. Sebastian hops back in, teasing Ciel for grinning. Ciel smiles all the time. Real, genuine smiles. Take that stupid monologue from chapter 2 about how he forgot how to smile. He's so angsty, but he does have genuine moments of happiness. Anyway, Sebastian is back and dressed like a doctor. He's very committed to the bit. Sebastian has already found out a lot of information about this hospital, which lets you know that this story arc will have a lot of ground to cover unrelated to the investigation. Sebastian has discovered that the main guy is Ryan Stoker, the hospital director, and that he and the other leading physicians are holding meetings under the name Aurora Society, and their main goal is absolute salvation of mankind through medical science, which sounds really good in theory, but their way of achieving this is unlawful human experimentation, which is not really ethical, to say the least. And there are periodic presentations of their research to their contributors and investors. Ciel makes plans to crash the next meeting, only to find out that the next meeting is, in fact, on the same passenger ship that Lizzie invited him on. There is nothing more embarrassing than telling someone you can't go somewhere, only to end up going. Rest in peace, Ciel. Luckily, Lizzie isn't the kind of person that'll hold this against you. She'll just be happy to see that you're there. I don't know why I keep phrasing lines in these deep dives like Ciel is watching and I'm talking directly to him. He's not real. Ciel, Sebastian, and Snake are due to set sail on the Campania. It's a footman's duty to accompany the master on their travels, so I'm really glad that Yana Toboso cleared this up, because when she said Snake was going to be a footman, I had no idea what that meant. But, like, good for him. While the other servants are seeing them off, Mayrin has an encounter with a cool and flirtatious man, a flashy fellow with glasses. He more or less asks Mayrin out, but she declines as she isn't going to be a passenger on the ship. He says maybe he'll ask her out again if he returns in one piece. As the ship sets off, the servants wave goodbye, and we see that this cool man is in fact our cringe fail loser boy Ronald Knox. Well, this isn't going to be a smooth sailing ship, not with the presence of a Reaper, which at this point in the manga is kind of a bit of an omen. Now aboard the boat, it's time to meet the Mitfords. Lizzie is so happy to see Ciel that she forgets herself, acting in her usual overexcited way despite her mother's reminders of, manners. Ciel had kept his sudden change of heart a secret in an effort to surprise Lizzie. I do think that it is just him being embarrassed that he did end up having to go on the trip after all, especially after telling her no. But it's also sweet to think that he wanted to show up as a surprise because Lizzie would be so overjoyed. Anyway, Lizzie's father reveal, and she also has an older brother? Sick! Alexis and Edward Mitford. I love these guys. Anyway, in a classic questionable anime and manga fashion, Edward has some sort of a sister complex, treating Ciel more like some random guy who's dating his sister and not like his first cousin. It's really weird, but hey, at least there's plausible deniability that Edward is just a doting and overprotective big brother. At least he doesn't say anything too weird, so his sister complex comes off more as endearing and less like incest bait jokes. Honestly, there's more disdain for Ciel than there is love for Lizzie at times, which I kind of find funny. Let this man bully his younger cousin. I say man, Edward is 16. I think he's 15 or 16. No, he would probably be 16. Maybe 17. He's still a teenager. He's not like a full-grown adult. It would still be funny if he was a full-grown adult beefing with CL. I think it's really funny when grown adults like jokingly beef with their younger family members. As long as it's all in good jest and they're just like, it's not a serious beef. I also love that for a split second, Yana Toboso wants us to think that Alexis is also as scary and stern as Francis can be, only for all of that tension to melt away when the big sweetheart that Lizzie so clearly takes after and shines through. I love this so much. I know that stereotypically rich people didn't have as much of a hand in raising their children. Most of that was delegated to house servants, but we've seen in flashbacks that the Phantom High family were pretty close, and based on that and the fact that Lizzie seems to show affection in the exact same way that her father does, I think it's safe to say that the Midfords are really close as well. Also loving the detail and continuity here with Sebastian and Snake having to slick their hair back since Francis is around. She really is that girl when it comes to keeping things neat and orderly, and I love that for her. Anyway, cue Ciel and Lizzie being cute. I so wish these two weren't first cousins, but hey, like I keep saying, Ciel is not living long enough to actually marry and have children, so at least there's that. However, the laid-back vacation vibes that these two have been enjoying will have to be put to the side. It's the evening of the meeting that Ciel and Sebastian are supposed to infiltrate. The real reason they're here. It's time to start thinking with the watchdog brain. Well, almost. This cruise ship is full of rich people with nothing better to do than be judgmental and gossip. And who better to talk shit about than the weird servant with scales on his face? People suck. And Snake is well aware of that. Ciel, though, in all of his 13-year-old wisdom, says, fuck 'em. Snake is different, but so is he. Of course they're different. They're all strangers after all. Honestly, clowning on Ciel aside, this is a really sweet scene. It's one that a lot of us turn to show how kind Ciel really is under all that angst and brattiness. He didn't have to reassure Snake. He didn't have to comfort this man, but he did. He noticed that Snake wasn't feeling too well, and he did what he could to help him. Short of directly confronting the people who were being mean, Snake is a part of his family now. Who cares if he's a misfit? They all are, after all. Wrapping up the conversation, Sebastian spots a man that they're investigating. And now it's time to get down to business. Meanwhile, in the third-class dining hall, Ronald is the life of the party, as he should be. He's having a grand old time, flirting it up, ever the ladies' man. The more I think about that phrase in relation to Ronald, the more weird it sounds. Like, what even is a ladies' man? He knows what girls like, I guess. I do love the characterization of him being a really good flirt, but he still can't get a girlfriend. Like, pop off, sir. While Ronald is rizzing up the folks at the third-class dining hall, Sebastian and Ciel have gotten into their disguises and are now working on infiltrating the suspicious meeting. Also, what on earth is absolute purification water? It sounds like something that would be in the Absolute cult in Baldur's Gate 3, or the weird cult in the anime that Ash and Angela ran. And it costs £30? Yeah, Ciel's right. What an outrageous price for water. But it serves to weed out the poor and the rational. Also foreshadowing to Ciel having to do something he's very uncomfortable with. Wonder what it'll be this time. Ah yes, the Phoenix. What a pose. And so very outside of what Ciel would normally do. Honestly, this is just really silly and iconic. Years after this chapter dropped, and years after everything in this story arc dropped, and before we even knew there was going to be an anime or musical adaptation of this, cosplayers were striking this pose in large groups at anime conventions, and it was a great time. Despite Ciel's disbelief that this pose is the right thing to do, they're greeted with a matching pose and welcomed into the Aurora Society. And who's inside? Oh, you'll never guess. Our favorite peculiar old man, Undertaker. And he's already laughing at Ciel and Sebastian. He's just like the rest of us. Undertaker is the self-insert character, for real, for real. That's a joke, by the way. Ciel asks him if he knows anything about the dead being brought back to life. But Undertaker, despite having just laughed at Ciel, requests his usual payment for information. However, they're interrupted by the worst man alive making an entrance. I cannot state enough how much I dislike the Viscount of Druid. There is only one fictional character I hate more, and he's not even in this series. I really need to stop talking about Baldur's Gate in the Black Butler videos. But it's okay, because I know Ciel and Sebastian also hate this pathetic excuse of a human being. The Viscount seems to immediately spot these newcomers and comes over to speak with them, and he's way too interested in Ciel. I know this is to create tension around the question of if he'll recognize Ciel for who he is, or for his disguise in the Red Butler arc where he was actually forced to spend time around this guy. I totally get that. I just don't like how it's executed here, but at least it's consistent characterization that the Viscount is a creep. Anyway, Ciel calls Sebastian his father, and the demon is very confused. They must not have decided on backstories for their disguised characters beforehand. I also would like to take a moment to bring up the fact that I think Sebastian thinks of himself, at least in his human form, as being much younger than humans perceive him. Yes, part of my evidence is from that one OVA in season 1 of the anime where he gets upset about a kid calling him old, but it's funny. And I think his confusion here can also be read as, me? Old enough to have a child your age? Me? He seems like that kind. Now that Ciel and Sebastian have effectively snuck in and eased any suspicions, it's time for the meeting to start, and the miracle doctor reveals himself, Ryan Stoker. Undertaker may have disappeared, but now it isn't really the time to wonder about that. Ryan Stoker is here to present his current research, and boy is it a doozy. Ryan Stoker believes in absolute health. A healthy body, healthy teeth, a healthy mind. It's true that each of these things can and do impact a person's overall health. You could have the best healthy habits in the world, but if your teeth are rotting out of your skull or you're struggling with mental health, then your body will have some difficulties and physical symptoms as well. Ryan Stoker is cooking with this thought process, though. He does lose me when he starts talking about death as something that needs to be cured, however. I, for one, am looking forward to getting a break from life in the most I'm actually doing really well mentally right now, and this isn't a sign of something kind of way that I could possibly express that sentiment. But Ryan here, he's feeling silly goofy, and he wants to play God with his medical science. He's got a corpse on display, a young woman who had a tragic death. Her body is covered in stitches, though, reminiscent of how a stuffed animal or doll would be hastily repaired by unskilled hands. Sebastian can confirm by the scent of death that this corpse is, in fact, real. Ryan then hooks up wires to the corpse and provides what he calls absolute salvation. Electricity rushes through, sparking and giving life. Before we get to see what happened, we meet back up with Ronald for a page. His time has run out, and as much as he'd probably rather stay there and have fun, he's got work to attend to. One of the women he was hanging out with offers to meet back up tomorrow, and he agrees. If they're both alive, that is.
Sir, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
I know what he means. Back at the Aurora Society meeting, we then see the corpse of the woman move. She sits up. Has Ryan Stoker really cured death? Sebastian doesn't seem so certain. Ciel also doesn't look happy or pleased to see the corpse moving. The young woman, seemingly reunited with her parents, is taken into an embrace. Everyone watches, amazed that the corpse was now moving on her own, all eyes on her, as her jaw unhinges, and she bites directly into her mother's neck. Chaos erupts. Everyone is screaming and running. I know most people credit Night of the Living Dead as one of the first depictions of zombies. However, zombies or zombie-like creatures have a rich history in Greek legends and also in practices like voodoo. So it's not too wild to expect someone in the Black Butler universe to have heard of zombies before, although they may not have been called zombies at the time. I think they were sometimes. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, now that chaos has ensued and the meeting is effectively over, the disguises come off, and Sebastian jumps into action. However, this reanimated corpse is not taken down by a knife to the heart. No. She is something beyond Sebastian's comprehension. This man is not familiar with stories of the undead coming back to life, I guess. So, Ciel and Sebastian have a creature beyond their level of understanding. How on earth are they supposed to overcome that? How can they take it down, reducing the damage it can do to innocent civilians? Also, Ciel is shocked that Lau actually knew what he was talking about, and it wasn't a lie or a jest, which, I don't know why, but now that I'm a newfound Lau lover and apologist, I think this is really, really funny. Accidental characterization that Lau is just a silly guy who says all sorts of stuff, and Ciel has learned to effectively tune him out and not take anything that man says seriously. Anyway, it's safe to say that things have not gone according to plan for Ryan Stoker. He seems equally shocked and horrified despite this being presented as his own research. He calls for nameless Aurora Society members to take the thing down, but guns and bullets have no effect on the walking corpse. Just as Ciel is theorizing how to at least stop the thing from causing more problems, Ronald comes to the rescue. Just like classic zombie lore, these creatures can only be stopped if you destroy their head. Coming in with his lawnmower ready for action, and as extra confirmation that the corpse was in fact dead, Ronald exclaims that he'd already reaped the soul of this zombie before. We then see Ronald reap the soul and extract the cinematic record of a victim nearby, confirmation that he is in fact a reaper in case you forgot, and also confirmation that reaping still works, further contrasting this zombie situation who had no cinematic record at this current time, at least not one for Ronald to collect. Ronald recognizes Sebastian based on Grell's description of him. At least that's what we're left to assume. They then discuss what's going on. Ronald reveals that the Reapers have no fucking clue what's going on, but they've gotten reports of corpses moving after their souls have been reaped. This seems like a relatively new problem that has popped up in the Black Butler universe. Different departments at the Reaper's Dispatch are chalking it all up to an issue or error amongst those in charge of retrieving souls. But Ronald has confirmed that these corpses do not have souls, something that should bar them from moving. They're not actually brought back to life, something Ciel says pretty literally, driving home the point that we're not supposed to see this as a resurrection, more of an undead being. They may not know what's going on, but at least they now know how to stop the corpse from wreaking havoc. They need to destroy the head. Ciel and Sebastian then go off to get Ryan to confess to whatever it is that is going on. Hopefully he'll provide some answers. But Ronald can't just let Sebastian go. He's worried that management will make something of it, accusing him of lying to cover up that a devil ate the souls instead, and he can't have any extra overtime because of that. Ciel isn't willing to stick around for the duel, so he's off on his own. Finally, we get to see this child act independently. Sebastian and Ronald have a cool action scene. I honestly forget that Black Butler is also classified as an action series, and Yana Toboso is pretty good at drawing dynamic fight scenes. It looks cool. Not much else to say here. Now on his own, Ciel seems to be a bit jumpy, especially when he turns his gun on Lizzie as she scares him. I don't know how she found him, but Lizzie is now with Ciel. She'd apparently followed him to hand him some cake. Yeah, honestly, I'm sure if he wasn't worried about his life or maybe his job as the watchdog, Ciel, our sweet-tooth king, would have really appreciated that. Ciel quickly tells her that he doesn't have time right now and it's not safe for her, instructing her to go back to her family. He then leaves her without confirming that she's going back. Ciel heads down to the cargo hold in search of Ryan, but instead he finds Snake, who had come down to share delicious food with his snakes. This is so cute. I love him so much. Lizzie has also followed Ciel down. She really wanted to do something nice for him. It was his favorite kind of cake, but when she goes to present it, the food has already been devoured. There are zombies in the cargo. Ciel asks Snake to protect Lizzie as he handles the walking corpse, but Snake notices that there are hundreds of coffins, each containing a reanimated corpse. This ship is full of zombies, and they are amongst the horde. All things considered, and the fact that certain reveals hadn't been made yet in the manga and are not even made in this chapter cover is so funny to me. Undertaker is just so silly goofy. Ciel, Lizzie, and Snake are now surrounded by hundreds of walking dead or undead creatures. I really love how Yana Toboso draws her zombies. They're really cool and honestly pretty creepy. They're not the classic mega decayed zombies, since these are people who died relatively recently. They have similar stitching on their head though, perhaps a nod to the process of making these undead creatures. The cover over their eyes is also a really cool detail. It's probably a reference to an actual burial tradition, but it's also serving as a way to keep the undead creatures from feeling too human. With their eyes covered, we can focus more on the monstrous aspects of these walking corpses. We're really good at picking out humanity in the eyes, even in things that aren't human. How many times have you seen someone say an animal has human eyes? So I think this decision to cover the eyes really drives home the point that these are not humans, and I love that. I think that's fun. Meanwhile, back where Ronald and Sebastian are having a little tussle, Ronald has to get back to business. He's honestly really chill the whole time he's fighting Sebastian, giving him compliments and just having a good time, even calling the fight playing around when it's time for him to rush off to do his actual job. Back to Ciel, he's got his hands full trying to figure out what to do and also keep Lizzie safe. It's a good thing they bumped into Snake down there, honestly. Snake is able to help protect Lizzie and keep Ciel safe as well, using his snakes to take down a zombie that snuck up on Ciel from behind. Ciel fills Snake in on what little he does know, and Lizzie is pretty shocked. Snake shares that these creatures don't seem to have sight or feeling, as they've had no reaction to his snakes, seemingly going on like they weren't even there. These creatures also lack intellect, unable to climb, and if they had a brain cell, they'd take the stairs to go attack the rest of the ship. Ciel theorizes that maybe they depend on hearing, but when throwing a plate to test that, there seems to be no reaction. So these things have like zero senses. These creatures are using just their nails and teeth to tear into the boxes that Ciel, Lizzie, and Snake are hiding on top of. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, Sebastian shows up. Of course the demon is here to tease Ciel for vowing to protect Lizzie. It's how an English gentleman should act, honestly. Per Ciel's request, Sebastian gets to go feral on some undead creatures. I think it's really cute that Ciel holds Lizzie close, shielding her eyes from the horrors. He is so sweet with her, and you cannot tell me that he does not care about her. He'd probably act the same way even if they weren't betrothed. That is his cousin, his bestie, and she's a woman. And as much as I love Ciel, I know that this kid sees Lizzie as an innocent and fragile being in need of protection. But I don't think it's just because she's a girl. Because we see that Ciel is surrounded by strong, powerful, and capable women. I think it has more to do with the childlike, cutesy way Lizzie presents herself. Ciel does not suffer from period-typical misogyny. Amidst the feral, demonic action, Ciel has a bit of a trauma flashback to that day where Sebastian eviscerated the cult members, those who defiled him. Ciel has to remind himself that he is outside of the cage, that this is different, and he's fine, he's okay. He also says that Ciel is there no more. Huh? How was the 2CL thing just a theory for so long when this kid is literally saying stuff like this in the official English translation? Also, we're seeing frames that show up again in the Blue Cult arc, which is very exciting. The bloody hand holding the ring, the blood dripping down the altar. Those fans who said that the whole twin thing was a cop-out and not well foreshadowed are looking real dumb right now. With all the love and respect in the world, I overlooked this my first time reading it. I'm not actually saying you're dumb if you didn't pick up on this the first time, because I sure as hell did not. Twin stuff aside, this scene is also really interesting because it's another glimpse into Ciel's psyche. Unlike the vivid flashback in the circus arc, Ciel isn't in an exact replica of his trauma, but just seeing Sebastian go creature mode is enough to somewhat trigger him. Which, honestly, I think that implies that Sebastian does not go creature mode around Ciel very often. It goes against his aesthetic and all, but also Ciel is in a place where he's able to talk himself down, able to ground himself and pull himself out of a full-on PTSD episode. Maybe, just maybe, he's able to heal, at least a little bit, enough to be aware when he's slipping and be able to kind of ground himself when needed, and I love that for him. Lizzie does call him out of his dissociative state, though. She's really worried about him, and she is able to sense when he's going through it. They literally grew up together. It's only natural that she'd be sensitive to when Ciel was not fully there, even if it's not the twin that she thinks it is. Sebastian is now done destroying all of the undead creatures, and he's looking like a proud little creature himself. Honestly, this is adorable. Ignore the piles of dead bodies and pool of blood. Ciel is honestly a bit shocked and probably disgusted. Sebastian reaches out, hands covered in blood, to help Ciel down, but Ciel refuses. I don't think it's not just him not wanting to get dirty. I know I just complimented Ciel for being able to talk himself out of a PTSD episode, but I don't think he's in a good state of mind right now. And I also think that Ciel resents Sebastian, hates him. And thinking of that day only brings the strong hatred for the creature by his side to the forefront. Sebastian changes out his gloves though and continues to help Ciel and Lizzie down. Ciel complains that Sebastian should have been more graceful, and that he was like a beast, clear disdain in his expression, as he lectures the beast in human form. Sebastian didn't have time to play around, and he needed to be quick, probably due to the sheer amount of monsters. There were so many, but at least they're fragile. More fragile than the average human, which seems like a small detail, but due to where the story goes after this arc, I think it is a really neat detail to make note of. These undead creatures are very fragile. You sneeze on them and they're gone. That's not entirely true. They may not seem fragile in this moment, but they're weaker than the average human, and that's something that I think is important to remember. Just as Ciel is wondering why there are so many corpses aboard the ship, Ryan Stoker appears, but he is incredibly frantic. He didn't mean for the corpses to revive in such an unhealthy condition, but there's no time to be questioned right now. He shares that the ship has 2 cargo portions, and Sebastian has only taken out 1/10, a single 10th of these monsters. And it appears that these hundreds or thousands upon thousands of corpses have awoken. They really have their work cut out for them, huh? Okay, so ship is full of zombies. Got it. What else could go wrong? The passengers of this ship are now being terrorized and eaten by countless undead creatures. This is like the worst case scenario for being on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I would not survive this arc. It's absolute carnage. And to make matters worse, in the telegram room, they get horrible news. If the ship continues on course, It's left unsaid, but it's important information that needs to be sent to the captain. Great. So maybe something else could, in fact, go wrong. Ciel orders Sebastian to get his family to safety, leaving him and Lizzie to fend for themselves, for a little while at least. But Ciel is confident that they'll be fine. It's him and his little pistol against the world, and he's confident he'll win. He is so 13 years old. Love that for him. It's also now canon that Ciel is not very patient, in case you needed to hear that directly from him. He gets right down to business, asking Ryan all the necessary information. How do they stop these things? A device that's in Ryan's room, which they must head towards, okay? How do the bodies move? A device that's implemented in the corpse and generates electrical currents. That's actually kind of cool. Why are we bringing people back to life, though? Ryan can't say. After a bit of threatening by Ciel, Ryan comes clean. Their technology had been bought by a company, Osiris, and a company that's developing several new drugs. Okay. Now, pretending to work together, Ryan and Ciel, and Lizzie and Snake, infiltrate the group once more, and Ciel has to Phoenix pose again. Good on Lizzie and Snake for picking up that this is what they need to do so quickly, and it's so cute that Lizzie is worried about Ciel, who is just embarrassed to be here. Back with Sebastian, he's met up with the rest of the Midfords, where they've already turned to their blades to help protect themselves and those around them. Sebastian is able to share the information he's learned, namely destroying the heads of these creatures is what stops them. Now that everyone is caught up on what's going on and the whereabouts of Lizzie has been confirmed, Sebastian tries to escort them to safety, but they all refuse. It is their duty to help people, so they will stick around and fight. They are knights after all, and also seeking approval and praise from Francis. I love this family. Meanwhile, Ronald is reaping the souls of his friends in the lower class dining hall. He's so busy, and the real show hasn't even begun yet. Again, what do you mean by that, sir? Ronald just keeps dropping, hints at future carnage and wreckage, and he's just not explaining. I love that. This is my favorite type of foreshadowing. We then see scouts in the crow's nest. People who I assume are supposed to be keeping a lookout for dangerous waters or objects up ahead. Honestly, they're probably also supposed to be keeping an eye out for pirates or other ships that could cause an issue. I keep forgetting that pirates are a real thing and not mythological creatures. I mean, I know they're more often than not human, but I always forget that they're not just made up for fiction's sake. Anyway, that's irrelevant here. These people in the crow's nest, they don't know of the undead creatures wreaking havoc below, and assume all of the noise is the sound of drunk people having a good old time. But their bliss under the sea of stars is also coming to an end, as the ship comes up on an iceberg. Yes, an iceberg, because zombies weren't enough, now we have to reenact the Titanic. But the captain isn't answering. No one can do anything. Those in the wheelhouse have been attacked already. Things are looking pretty dire, and Ronald is about to crash into overtime, something he's so against just as a concept. But for those of us who were worried that it was just him on the job, rest assured, there's a second Reaper on the scene. Our favorite lady. She enters with an honestly pretty good sex joke, I'm not gonna lie, it's a really good joke. Just in time for the ship to crash into the iceberg. This maiden voyage, shred apart and covered in blood. It's truly a luxury cruise to die for. More players are coming onto the scene. We've got the Midfords fighting off zombies, Ciel, Snake, and Lizzie getting to the device to stop the zombies, Sebastian rushing back to Ciel's side, and 2 Reapers here to collect all the souls. It's not shaping up to be a fun night for those on the Campania. Well, Grell is having a great time. The jet black seas are being dyed with the shades of her beloved rosy red. Grell is just determined to have a good time all the time. Good for her. Good for her. The ship has now made contact with the iceberg, which complicates things for those fighting off the undead creatures. However, Sebastian is able to activate watertight doors to keep the ship from going down too soon, so that's convenient. Anyway, Yana Toboso is very clearly inspired by the Titanic story and the movie. It's undeniable now, especially since Grell and Ronald have a moment referencing one of the, I guess, iconic scenes. Sure, let Grell have her dramatic moment. All these people were slated to die anyway, and she can't change that. Well, she could, but it'd be unorthodox and probably would be overruled anyway if she decided that someone deserved to live, a mechanic that was introduced but has never actually been used. I do think it's funny that Grell lets Ronald know that he's just not hitting. She doesn't like him like that, and I think that's fun. It also goes to show that she isn't just boy crazy like some may make her out to be. She has taste, she has standards, although she too is very swept up into the inherent eroticism of violence, and she has very interesting tastes and standards. Good for her. During this moment, we find out that there's over 1,034 souls that they are there to collect. That's the number of what they have left, by the way. That doesn't include what Ronald has already reaped. And I'm not sure how many he's already collected. Probably not too many, though, but there's no telling, really. Either way, they've got a lot of work to do, and they also have to investigate the moving corpses on top of all the reaping of the souls. So, good luck, guys. Good luck. Ciel is straight up not having as good of a time as Grell. I don't think anyone is, to be honest. The ship is starting to flood, and he's gotten wrapped up in it. He and everyone else in the second boiler room have had to hurry before they get locked in by the watertight doors that Sebastian has closed. Lizzie is also at risk of getting left behind, meaning that she would die in there. Ciel cannot let that happen, and I'll tell you, if that did happen, I would riot. She's weighed down by her dress. Despite being told to leave her, Ciel goes back, risking his own life to make sure that he helps her as much as he can. This separates Snake from them, and also Ryan Stoker. He made it through the door before it closed. Ciel tells him that it's fine. He and Lizzie can get out through the ducts since they're tiny. And honestly, it's a solid plan that works best because they've got the small frames of prepubescent children. And an adult like Snake or anyone else that would have been left behind would have a harder time going through the ducts. And his snakes can't really be in cold water for too long, so this is really the only way that everyone would have the best chances at making it through this nightmare. I also really love that Ciel is thinking about snakes in this moment because he recognizes that that's important to his new footman. Ciel is thinking in survival mode though, and that much is clear when he asks Lizzie to remove the outer layers of her clothing. Her dress is just too big to make it through the ducts, and he will not let her stay there and die for the sake of vanity. He doesn't understand why she's so obsessed with staying cute until the very end, and I'm sure to him it's all just frivolous, silly vanity and her just being a silly little girl. Not in like a demeaning way, but just like she's very, very attached to her femininity kind of way. He's normally willing to put up with Lizzie's shenanigans, but right now it's life or death. So he doesn't hesitate to just rip her dress off, explaining that if she dies there, that'll be the end of everything. He reasons with her, stating she wouldn't be able to wear her favorite clothes. She couldn't continue to be cute if she were dead. I think it's during this that Lizzie starts to realize just how dire the circumstances are. And also, I think it is very out of character for Ciel to just rip her clothes off. Like, that's how you know things are very serious. They are so serious that Ciel is not thinking anything other than, how can I make sure we get out of this alive? She apologizes for being selfish, and you know, I'm so glad that she's a year older than Ciel. I really do think that at the ages that they are, 13 and 14, that 1 year makes a huge difference in growth and emotional maturity. And that growth is what allows Lizzie to swallow her insecurities here and just move on, focusing on making right for her shortcomings and surviving. Say what you want about her during this arc, but once she starts to get serious, she shows incredible awareness and maturity, especially in comparison with some of her earlier appearances in the manga. Ciel has a mild asthma cough. Well, it really could have just been him choking on water, but I kind of doubt it. Lizzie notices this, and she knows that something is just a bit off with him, almost as if the real Ciel Phantom Hive was stronger in health than that. Almost as if it was the other twin who was sickly, taking after their mother Rachel. Almost as if just as soon as the moment starts, it ends. We linger for a moment before Sebastian's sopping wet frame takes up the page. Finally, some fan service that doesn't make me feel like I need to be put on a watch list. If only it was for someone cooler than Sebastian, though. Why did I just have the thought of what if we got Aberline fan service? The reason I love Aberline so much is because of the silly, goofy guy in the musicals. Not the character that gets fan service. But now I'm, like, dying. I've seen a lot of Wild Thirst edits of, like, in jest, for Baldur's Gate characters. I saw a Thirst edit for a wheel of cheese. A wheel of cheese, right? Surely we can get some Aberline fans. I am joking here. I really don't care that much, but I think it would be funny. Anyway, our demon here is suddenly a ship expert, able to tell what got hit, where it flooded, and where he needs to slay the hardest. Meanwhile, Grell and Ronald are getting worn out by fighting. There's a lot of undead creatures to deal with. Ronald then realizes there's no point in fighting off the creatures at that moment because the sinking ship will sink soon. He says this at the same time that Sebastian realizes this for a dramatic reveal. They've got less than an hour before the whole thing is consumed by the ocean. Less than an hour to get back to Ciel and save him from the cold temperatures of the water, which will impact his health. It's time for Sebastian to go collect his son. Just like the real world, those who were not rich enough to shell out for first class are being told to go fuck themselves when they're just trying to survive. Literally, behind bars, begging to be let up because the ship is flooding and they're trying not to die down there. But the guards do not budge. They just simply don't care. Rich people do not see poor people as human beings. And these guards do not want to cause more of a panic in first class. Meanwhile, those in first class are being terrorized by the undead creatures. They're all doomed. Some random guy tries to buy Sebastian's help, not realizing that this man is on a mission, and he doesn't care about anyone other than his dinner. Zombie horses and a skeleton driver appear? Sure. Horses whose skin has rotted off, exposing their skulls, trample the man, whisking him away. This guy's right. What on earth was that? What is going on this cruise ship tonight? The crew of this ship start making plans to lower the lifeboats, allowing for at least some to escape the carnage. The Midfords are also still fending off the monsters, doing their best to help as many people as they can. Back with Ronald and Grell, Grell is trying to understand what's going on. As stated before, the dead moving without souls should not be possible. This is all so out of the realm of things that should be possible. Adding to the oddities, the undead horse-drawn carriage comes by, but just as quickly as it appeared, Grell took it down. This is kind of starting to feel like a fever dream, I'll be honest. Catching up with Snake, he's supposed to still be with Ryan, who's escaping, taking their only way up by himself like the spineless coward he is. Okay, being a bit harsh here, anyone would be terrified in this situation, but that does not give him the right to abandon others, even if the others are kind of like holding him hostage. Ciel and Lizzie have made it to a safer location, though, through the ducts. Ciel is caught by Sebastian, who's stopped him from busting his ass on the floor. Ciel sneezes, prompting Sebastian to bring up his illness, but Ciel adamantly shuts that conversation down. He's angry about it, and Sebastian realizes that it's something that needs to be kept a secret, noticing Lizzie's curious look. I do believe that Lizzie may have had some moments of stuff not adding up before, but I think this story arc is where she really starts to realize that the Ciel in front of her may not be who he says he is. And yeah, I'm like, I know it's confirmed farther along in canon, but at this point, like, it's canon enough. Ciel's basically said that Ciel's not there. I'm just gonna start referring to the twin things like we already know at this point in time. Just as Sebastian tries to take Ciel and Lizzie up to safety, Grell and Ronald show up, and Grell is ready to play. Well, attack. Ronald is less than pleased that they've found Grell's man. He's so tired and just so ready to get this job over with. Justice for my lazy boy. Grell, I love you, but this behavior is reckless child endangerment. Sebastian's main goal right now is to make sure Ciel and Lizzie make it off of this doomed ship safely, and Grell is directly hindering that. But hey, that means we get to see more of her, so it's a win for the readers. So sorry to Ciel and Lizzie. Also, this is the first time that Lizzie has been around the Reapers, as far as we know, so I wonder what she thinks of Grell. I'm sure she's a bit taken aback. Grell has a huge personality and can be a lot. Lizzie, let me know your thoughts. I want to know them. She asks who Grell is, and Sebastian just tells her that Grell is a deviant, and she shouldn't be worried about her too much. Sebastian is canonically transphobic. This is a joke. I honestly don't think Sebastian cares about gender. As far as we know, gender may not even play a role, or at least the same role, in demon society. Do demons even have a society? There's a lot here that tells me Sebastian's transphobia is really just a way to disrespect Grell specifically. It is specifically about making Grell feel belittled and disrespected and annoyed, like trying to get under her skin. I don't think he's doing it because he hates trans people. I honestly think he doesn't give a shit. He just wants to be mean. They fight a bit until Grell's chainsaw nicks a window, allowing for water to spill in. It's like when you're playing Dungeons & Dragons and you're like, I don't care how small the room is, I'm gonna cast Fireball and blow everybody up. That's what Grell's doing right now. Ciel's having a bad time. Sebastian is preoccupied in a 2v1, essentially, and Ciel and Lizzie have been taken down by the water. Poor baby boy Ciel hurt his leg, and now the undead creatures are on the scene. This cannot get any worse. They're approaching Lizzie as well, which is great. It's great. With Lizzie's life in immediate danger, Ciel jumps into action, but he's out of bullets. Things are looking so bleak for them. Really bleak. Lizzie has a moment of apologizing for not being able to stay cute until the very end, something that'll hold greater weight soon. But as of right now, it just looks as if she's about to be devoured and she realizes that she's going to die soon. Even Sebastian is certain that she's not long for this world. But Lizzie pulls out a sword, defending herself and flawlessly taking down these undead monsters. She's a bit of a battle machine as she slices through the corpses. Her parents would likely be so proud of her right now if they could overlook the fear of almost losing her. As she fights, Lizzie has a bit of a breakdown. She's so ashamed of this ugly, unladylike side of her. She wanted to do anything in her power to keep Ciel from seeing this part of her. But at the end of the day, she'd rather be seen as ugly and protect those who are most important to her. It's her duty, as the daughter of Marquis Midford and the wife of the Queen's Watchdog. I do actually really enjoy this confirmation that Lizzie is not only aware of Ciel's position as the Queen's Watchdog, but is proud of it. I'm sure Frances had a pretty good idea of what the position was and meant for those who held it. She'd watched her brother play out that role until he died, and the both of them watched their mother hold that role. Although I'm not entirely sure how aware they were of what their mother was doing, since I believe Vincent and Frances were really young. I think Vincent might have taken on the watchdog role while he was a teenager and still going to Weston College, but I don't remember why I think that, so I'm not gonna state it like it's fact, but that's the lens I'm looking at this through. But it makes sense that Frances would be sure that Lizzie knew how to fight with a sword. She knew that Ciel led a dangerous life, and she made sure that Lizzie would have the capabilities to defend herself and her home. Perhaps a way to make sure that whatever happened to Rachel and Vincent would never happen again. Although, we do know that Lizzie had been training before that happened, because, I mean, they're literally a family of knights, but the thought is still there, I believe. I think after the events of what happened on Ciel's 10th birthday, Frances might have trained Lizzie a little bit harder, or had that in the back of her mind of, well, Rachel couldn't really defend herself, but Lizzie will be able to. Especially after Ciel came back and Frances could see that there was still a future for Lizzie as the wife of the Queen's watchdog. Girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice. From a young age, Lizzie was taught by those around her that the role of a woman was to be sweet and docile, enforced by words from Madame Red and watching other girls live out that idealistic version of femininity, and reinforced by child Ciel's desire to have a cute bride, unlike Aunt Frances, who was strong and scary. Lizzie's story is one of a girl wrestling with internalized misogyny. Society teaches her that she is to be brainless, docile, pretty, nothing more. She is to be someone a man can teach and protect. However, there is more to her than that. She is in fact a human being, and her mother trains her in the way of the sword, so that she can be well equipped to be the watchdog's wife. And Lizzie's really good at it, so much so that her peers assume she's a boy at first, even if she'd rather be a precious angel, a girl who is to be protected. That was to be her role in society after all, as a woman. That's what Ciel wanted, wasn't it? That's what Lizzie vowed to be. And she feels that she is less than because she can't be this perfect, idealized woman. But she'll still try. But everything changes on the day the Phantom Hives were attacked. A month of mourning for her family and for her betrothed. This is glossed over pretty quickly because we know that Ciel comes back, but I do want to focus on it for just a moment. Lizzie would have been 11 around the time of the attack, I believe. The toll that would take on a child that young to lose people so important to them in such a horrible way, the toll it would take on her to feel like her life was essentially over at the young, tender age of 11. The one that she'd vowed to marry and to become the ideal woman for was now gone. The person that she had been devoting her life to was gone. A widow before the wedding. That may be a bit dramatic, but I really do feel that's how Lizzie felt in this moment, or during that month. And then Ciel came back. But he came back wrong. With a new butler by his side, he was smaller than Lizzie now. She'd initially thought he came back smaller and thinner, but then she realized it was her who had grown. Honestly, I think it's a combination of both, to be honest. I know that kid was malnourished. He did not have the chance to grow. That was a scrawny, starving child. So it was probably a bit of both. But, with her beloved back, Lizzie made a new vow. A vow to protect Ciel, that little wet cat of a child who needed a strong hand by his side. Lizzie would give up being the cutest, ideal girl for the sake of making sure Ciel was never taken away again. She would hold herself back to keep Ciel from feeling inadequate, protecting his feelings. She prioritized Ciel over herself. And she would do anything if that meant being able to protect Ciel. I'm not saying Lizzie completely overcame internalized misogyny, but I think she did in a way. There's this narrative of her overcoming that internalized misogyny, even just a bit, for the sake of doing what's important to her. She still struggles with it, sure. We see this throughout the whole series. She's still obsessed with being the cutest version of herself, but I believe that's because she thinks that's what Ciel wants. That's what he told her when they were younger, after all. That's why she waited so long to jump into action. She didn't want to upset her beloved. And I think that's part of why she starts to figure out that CL, the one who stands by her side today, is not the same CL as before. Sebastian apologizes to Lizzie for letting her be in the situation where she's had to stand up and fight. It goes against his aesthetics or whatever, but I do believe this is a pivotal moment for her that needed to happen for her to grow and feel more secure, not only in herself, but her relationship with CL. With the corpses in the area now being taken care of, it's time to move on to the next thing. Both CL and the Reapers realize they don't have time to entertain one another. Instead, they have more pressing matters to attend to. Ryan holds the keys to this case, and we can only assume that Ronald noticed it was time to go collect more souls. But Grell does seem pretty interested in what CL said about Ryan, so we'll probably be seeing them again pretty soon. Sebastian notices that CL's leg is swollen or just messed up. He's likely twisted something, or I think he just twisted something. I don't think he actually broke anything. Lizzie is more concerned with CL's well-being than her image, even offering to carry him. But Sebastian cannot allow her to do so. She is still a lady. This seems to remind her of her insecurities and what she feels her place is, and she's really embarrassed by what she's offered to do. She breaks down again, crying over being the scary girl that CL despises. She still holds fear from when they were younger. However, CL has no idea what she's talking about, because it wasn't him who said that. It was the real CL. But when Lizzie explains, he kind of brushes it off, explaining that it was just a long time ago. This kid clearly has never felt that way. You can tell based on how he can't even fathom that was the concern of hers. And he is also, as I said earlier, surrounded by a lot of strong and powerful women. It's normal to him. Between Aunt Frances, Madame Red, Nina Hopkins, May Rin, Ran Mao, the Queen, this CL has a plethora of strong women he either looks up to and respects, or at the very least has been around for them to teach him that women are just as capable as men are. He doesn't hold on to this idea that Lizzie is less than because she has the ability to fight and be strong in ways that are not typical of women during this time. Lizzie is still worried though that CL hates her now, but he assures her that he could never. But the moment is cut short by Sebastian being ready to make fun of CL for being nice and loving, something he realizes and becomes pretty embarrassed about. This demon. They're also running against the clock here, so they really do need to get moving. And just in time, Snake catches up with them, and he, or Emily, is truly glad everyone is safe. I love how quickly he's felt accepted into the Phantom Hive family. This is everything to me. The group then makes plans to meet up with the Midfords, after realizing Ryan has escaped their grasp. The Midfords are helping facilitate the passengers escaping on lifeboats. Edward is adamant that women and children get off the ship first, even seeming angry that some of the men were desperate to escape as well. And on one hand, I get it. Let the more vulnerable leave first. But also, dude, that ship is really scary to be on right now. Have some compassion. He doesn't realize it, but the men and women are equally vulnerable right now. Edward is very happy to see Lizzie, though, empathizing with the struggle she must have gone through. Despite it being rooted in a weird sister complex, I do love the dynamic between CL and Edward. They're so silly and low-key competitive. I do think that this CL likes Edward, but I wonder if the real CL liked Edward. He's got such a chip on his shoulder, and it's likely just because he knows CL and Lizzie will get married, but it makes you wonder, did the real CL fight with Edward when they were younger? This CL that we're following seems to be pretty chill with him, saying what Edward wants to hear for the most part to keep the peace, but is still prone to bouts of petty antagonizing. Edward orders CL to get on a boat, but he offers his spot to Snake instead, asking Edward to take care of Snake while he's gone. CL still has work to do. Just as Lizzie states that if CL is staying, she will too, Sebastian renders her unconscious so that they don't have to waste time convincing her to escape. Edward appreciates this. He knows his sister is stubborn, but he also doesn't have the heart to attack her, even if it were for her own good. Edward then calls out to CL, saying he doesn't have to come back. I honestly love Snake's reaction here. He's not familiar with how these two cousins interact. Ciel's a bit taken aback at first, but he takes it as a challenge, turning to assure Edward that he'll return. In a weird way, I think Edward's callous words seem to motivate Ciel. Since they're cousins, I'd like to think that that was the intention, but Edward needed to maintain that cool older brother persona. He would probably rather be caught dead than be nice to his little cousin, so he uses harsh words to mask the real feelings. I'm also ready to admit that's just a headcanon, but the Weston arc gives us some gas to cook with on this at least. Back in the first class hall, Ryan is on the run, but he's clumsy. What a silly little guy. Well, okay, it's more like the ship is really shaky, and as it shifts, Ryan is flung off the balcony he's running on, so it's not really his fault. Either way, though, he is sent flying down to his doom. Grell catches him, and it looks like we might finally get some answers on what is going on here. As things look dire, the crew on the ship are firing off distress signals. They received a transmission from a cargo ship, though. Things are starting to look up for those poor passengers. Grell and Ronald are finally able to question Ryan, hopefully getting answers for their impossible moving corpses problem. Ronald is pretty adamant that death is a rule that must be abided by, which, fair enough, there is no avoiding it, and attempts to avoid it makes his life harder. They ask Ryan how to stop the corpses, and he takes them to where the device should be, only to find that it's missing. He seems shocked, but also like he knows exactly who must have taken it. Ciel and Sebastian, in their search for Ryan, have stumbled across the Viscount of Druitt, in a framing and timing that makes it pretty clear the Viscount is who Ryan thinks took the device. There's a funny moment of Ciel and Sebastian knowing this man, but since every time they've met, these two have been in disguises, so the Viscount doesn't really know who they are. I will say I do enjoy this humor intention. The knowing stuff you aren't supposed to, it's great, it's so funny. The Viscount tells them that he's staying behind, putting himself in danger because he has a device that he can't just leave. It's time to hit the Phoenix pose again for old time's sake. The Viscount seems a bit shocked that they already knew that the device could stop the moving corpses, but he brushes past that and takes them to see the creation of the new Aurora. It's at this moment that we run into Undertaker again. He is in silly goofy guy mode, as always. He says he was stopped while running for his life to help carry this device. His characterization is so unserious in the best of ways. He does admit that he has no idea how to use the device and ponders on if it's even useful. This is really, really neat foreshadowing for stuff that's about to happen, and this also feels like an inside joke with himself. If you don't get it, you will get it pretty soon. Just as the Viscount is mentioning that the cast is one player short, so he can't start the device yet, our final actor, Ryan, shows up. Yelling accusations. It looks like all the pawns are gathering into place. This ensemble cast is ensembling. The Viscount, as power-hungry as ever, wants to topple Ryan's empire and build his own. He seeks immortality and eternal beauty, which makes a lot of sense considering how obsessed he is with the concept of beauty, and considering beauty is often tied to youth. I can see why the Viscount is seeking immortality. He's a grown man, and his time being seen as youthful is running out. We don't know exactly how old he is, but given that he's had formal medical training, I'd assume he's either in his late 20s or early 30s, because medical training takes time, and he clearly holds a position of power, like, as a Viscount. Like, he's not young. Like, okay, wait, he's young, but he's not, like, a teenager or just barely an adult, I think. Still young, but old enough for the societal fears of aging to really set in and feel more like a threat. And also not old enough to realize that aging in and of itself can be beautiful. So that feels like late 20s, early 30s to me. There is a really fun, relatable moment of everyone wanting to kill the Viscount. Grell is so real for that, and I do love how Ciel and Sebastian take turns expressing the desire to eliminate the Viscount from life, only for the other to say now is not the time. Of all the reoccurring gags about this character, that one is definitely my favorite. Hordes of the undead descend upon the scene, but the Viscount will not activate the device. Not until he says something weird to Ciel and wants Ciel to call him Kaiser. And now it's Ciel's turn to express his bloodlust. The Viscount's ego and weird vibes also get to Ronald. The whole room wishes to kill this man, and I wish they would have. It's honestly a miracle that he survives and is still alive in the series. Yana, Toboso, I am begging you. I'm on my hands and knees. Please let them kill this man. Full spread Phoenix pose for the silly goofies. That felt important to mention. It's finally time for the Viscount to shut up and activate the device. However, nothing happens. The corpses are still moving and coming into attack. Undertaker is dying of laughter as if he knows something. Ryan is shocked and in disbelief. He yells out, asking if he's been deceived. Okay, so maybe Ryan isn't the mastermind here. That much is becoming blatantly obvious. Growl jumps down to kill the Viscount, but just before she can bury her chainsaw deep into his chest like he deserves, Undertaker steps in to protect him? Just because he thinks the Viscount is funny. Oh, also, Undertaker can fight with weapons that a death scythe can't cut through? The silly goofy guy is gone, melted away and replaced with a more serious and kind of cool adversary. Just what is the Undertaker doing here? Undertaker is not who we thought he was. He's been masking his presence, hiding his green and yellow eyes. Undertaker is in fact a Grim Reaper, and he's been fooling everyone. A huge revelation for those that either forgot the comedic reveal in season 1 of the anime or never watched it. Caught us off guard. I was caught off guard, at least. I forgot that he was revealed as a Grim Reaper in the anime in season 1. I completely forgot about it. And also, most people assumed that if it was in the anime, it wasn't canon, so it wasn't going to come up again. Because that's what we were all told. Everyone said, if it's in season 1 of the anime, or like season 2, it's not canon, don't take it seriously. So when little details like that from the anime ended up being real, it was a huge shock. I will say, I've actually read that Yana Toboso was a bit upset about how the anime handled the Undertaker as a Reaper thing, making it more of a joke and ruining the impact of the reveal in the manga, making it more of a, oh, okay, alright, so it's like the anime, than a, holy shit, he's what? kind of vibe. Although, at the moment, I can't verify that information, but I have seen that circulating around the fandom for a long time. And I am inclined to believe that it's probably true. Because if I were her, I would be very upset about that. I would be so devastated. Anyway, Undertaker does not deny this new revelation. Instead, he laughs, stating it's been at least half a century since anyone's called him that. Oh, so he's old. Perhaps he's an ancient man. Ryan wants answers, though. He was told that the device would allow him to control the corpses, but clearly that was a lie. Undertaker is playing coy. This is all a joke to him. He knew that the device wouldn't actually serve a purpose, but Undertaker has a different motive here. He had less comical purpose to all of this. Undertaker does tear into Ryan, though, stating that what he was doing stopped being medicine the moment that he got involved. And besides, Ryan cannot call himself a physician if he's performing procedures that he does not understand. But he was a good little boy, doing what Undertaker said. He was nothing more than a pawn. Ciel asks if Undertaker was the true mastermind, and as much as he'd like to say it's a secret, Undertaker does acknowledge that Ciel has put forth more than enough funny business payments for information, so he'll share. He stated that these experiments were done out of curiosity. Humans are composed of their body and a soul, and when you've got the two together, a human will live and record memories to their cinematic record. But when they die, a Reaper cuts this record off, giving it a definitive end. After a while of being a Reaper, Undertaker wondered what would happen if someone made a sequel, a part 2, a follow-up. What if he took the dead bodies and added blank records, making a soulless, living being? Grell doesn't believe what she's hearing, but Undertaker challenges her to check for herself, so she does. And we get to see that Undertaker is a Charlie Chaplin fan. Yana DeBoso and her silly film references. The notion that life goes on with these new records that Undertaker attached is enough to bring the dead to movement. All living things strive to make up for what they lack, and these creatures lacked souls. So they'll do what they can to seek out their soul, ripping open normal, living humans in an attempt to balance out their never-ending cinematic record. Undertaker can do all he wants, but he can't create souls. So what he's left with are these weird husks of what once was human. A bizarre doll. Never living or dead. Ciel is pretty disgusted by all this, stating that even bad taste has its limits. Ciel sees nothing more than twisted, unethical experimentation going on here. A Reaper trying to play at God or whatever. Undertaker still finds beauty in these dolls, speaking of them with a level of adoration and affection that borders too close to mega weird and nasty vibes. It seems he prefers these dolls to humans since they don't speak and cannot lie. They're just sewn up skin. Taxidermy. Ciel is just as, if not more, disgusted here as he was with literal human traffickers in earlier arcs. Undertaker seems to not mind, though. He shares that there are humans out there who appreciate these dolls, who desire these dolls, children who can't feel pain or fear. He explains that they'd make excellent military animals. Okay, so I didn't think much of this line the first time I read it. I for some reason thought the Queen wasn't going to be that big of a deal because she was a big deal in the anime. But I have since rewatched Season 1 with my tinfoil hat, and I am here to say that I think Season 1 of the anime spoils and references more than we realize, albeit in a weird and convoluted way. We know that the Queen and her associates are up to something in the manga. She's making moves to keep German advancements from going too far. She's doing what she can to make sure that her empire stays on top. So it would make sense that she'd be down for these doll soldiers. And this ties in with the Queen being connected to the big bad of Season 1 of the anime. Although I believe in the manga she'll be more of the mastermind than a grieving pawn. I'm just waiting to see how the Queen relates back to the blue arcs that are currently ongoing. But on the other hand, if she were the mastermind, why? What reasoning does she have behind causing everything? But on the other hand, there's also the butlers clad in white, who seem to have a very strong hand in what's going on. They're very involved, whether they're acting on their own or through orders of the Queen. It is very interesting to think about. Undertaker continues to explain those eccentric fellows, probably talking about the double Charles, seems to be curious as to what these dolls could do. So Undertaker made plans to throw an equal number, dolls and humans, into the ring, just to see what would happen. And that's how we all got here on this godforsaken boat. Who will be left? How many? This is just one big experiment. Confirmation that Undertaker doesn't really value human life, but he has been shown to value Ciel's life, the life of a phantom hive. That's another point for the Grandpa Undertaker theory out there. Undertaker admits he was shocked by the iceberg, but that did save him the trouble of trying to figure out how to sink the ship. He quit being a Reaper, so he no longer has access to the list of those fated to die. So he's just kind of going based off of vibes. And good for him, I guess? Surprisingly, even Sebastian seems bothered by Undertaker's complete lack of care or concern for those on the ship. It was never fated to make it to America. all of these passengers were doomed from the start, which in a way feels like a reference to the conspiracy theory that the Titanic was actually its older sister ship, the Olympia, or the Olympic, one of the two, dressed up as the new Titanic ship in an attempt at insurance fraud or something. Like they knew something would happen with it. Again, I'm not giving you guys the greatest rundown of that conspiracy. It's been several years since I heard it. But there is a conspiracy out there. I don't know if Yana Toboso is directly referencing this or if it's just coincidence. It's probably just coincidence. Either way, Undertaker wonders if he'll get scolded since Ciel's interference caused more humans to survive than he was expecting. Grell isn't having any of it. She feels it's her duty to do something about this. As a Reaper, she can't allow Undertaker to warp death. Ronald is still trying to catch up, though. He points out that the Undertaker does not wear glasses. Does that make him a deserter of sorts? Something they do get every once in a while, but not super often. Grell doesn't care, though. It doesn't matter what Undertaker is, he needs to be stopped regardless of where he falls in Reaper society. He's doing too much. She determines that they should tie him up and bring him back to the higher-ups to let them deal with it. They also still need the details on the moving corpses and how he's doing this, after all. It's kind of important to their investigation that they're kind of there for. Battle ensues, but Sebastian can't let them take Undertaker away. Once again, his duties and the Reaper's duties are at a head. A common theme in Black Butler, or at least the franchise as a whole. Ciel has a responsibility to the Queen. I don't get why they can't work together and just do both, but they never come to this conclusion ever in their lives. Allowing for Ciel to present Undertaker to the Queen and then taking him up to the Reaper's realm is just not a thought that crosses anybody's mind. I mean, I know it's for tension and drama, but come on, guys. The solution is so easy. Why are we fighting each other? Anyway, Sebastian is now in a race against Ronald and Grell to take Undertaker down and into custody. But Undertaker will not go down so easily. Canon confirmation that Reapers just cannot see. They're very nearsighted, but that's not going to stop Undertaker from kicking ass. And he seems to be able to control when other death scythes can cut through his weapons. Either that or not all of his weapons are death scythe proof, which is probably a very likely. That's probably it. Either way, this creates a slight distraction with Grell. Also, Undertaker doesn't rely on his eyes. He's got other senses to fall back on, I guess. Things are not looking very good for Sebastian, Ronald, or Grell. The three of them, not entirely working together, can't seem to overtake Undertaker. Honestly, I think if they had put their differences aside and worked together to at least subdue him or bring him down, they would probably stand a chance. But as it stands, they're not making any progress. They are racing against the clock to take down Undertaker while also having to keep in mind that the ship is actively sinking. They don't have time for a long, drawn-out fight, but Undertaker has all the time in the world. So much so that he doesn't bring out his own full death scythe until now. Slicing through Grell after teasing her for not realizing it sooner. It's something that Undertaker isn't supposed to have, but he did sneak it out due to a personal attachment after all the time he had spent with the weapon. It's also more of a traditional death scythe in design, and compared to all the other Reapers we've seen so far, all three of them with their gardening supplies and chainsaw and you know what, it's very different, and I think it's a nod as to how old Undertaker is. He's an old school Reaper, a more traditional Reaper in a sense. Undertaker has been around for a very long time. I think that is fairly obvious when you put together all the puzzle pieces of his character. He's old. He's old. He feels very ancient. Undertaker is taking this fight seriously now, going on the offense. He's being very serious, but he still has an air of playing around and joking about. He's got incredible power and range. Sebastian has a good idea of getting inside the range of the scythe, making it harder to fight him off, but Undertaker adapts. He's smarter than that. He fights dirty and uses CL as a hostage. Undertaker knew that using CL as bait would cause Sebastian to abandon his strategy. CL is a weakness. Sebastian prioritizes ensuring CL's safety over anything else as per the terms of their contract. CL's life in danger, Demon and Fray reach out for one another as CL flies off into the abyss, hands barely grasping before CL falls out of reach as Sebastian is impaled. Easily one of the most dramatic moments in the entire series thus far, and honestly, maybe even beyond this point. Sebastian is gravely injured. Once again, we see his cinematic record fly out. Only this time, due to the deeper wound, we get more than just the recent daily misfortunes of the Phantom Hive servants. Undertaker wishes to know why Sebastian parades around as a butler, playing pretend, and that's the story that the cinematic records grant us. Sebastian's past and present melding together, we see CL calling out for him, hand just out of reach. Sebastian's gloved hand turned into that of his demon form, reaching to shake hands with a young boy. A young and battered boy in a dark and filthy basement. CL is calling for him. We see the moment Sebastian becomes a butler, a form befitting of an earl. We're 62 chapters into this journey, and we're finally getting some insight on the titular character of the series. The Black Butler himself. We finally get to see the moment the contract is made. The demon searched for the one who made the sacrifice. Have it be known that while the cultist did the physical act of sacrificing CL Phantom Hive, it is his dear brother who did the emotional act of sacrificing. That child was not for the cultist to serve on a platter to the demon. They didn't give anything up. It was the child in the cage who lost something, so that child would be the one given the chance to convene with the demon. The child in the cage craves power, the power to avenge the wrongdoings that were done to him. I'd even go as far as to say the power to not be a victim again. This child is scared. We don't know for certain at this point in time of the manga what he went through, but we can infer a lot. We more or less know that he was abused by the cultist and incredibly traumatized. And there's also the matter of losing his family and watching his twin brother be sacrificed brutally just a mere feet away. This child has already been dragged through hell, and if making a contract with a demon is what he needs to achieve the power to claw his way out and never go through that again, then so be it. He'll throw himself into the abyss, whatever it takes to achieve the most power possible. He wishes for more power than anyone. The demon takes this trauma response and calls it greed. Sure, there is greed for power in that moment, but I feel the motivations and the underlying causes for such feelings make it less of an act of greed and more of an act of this kid is trying his best to survive. The demon chooses the eye as the location of the contract mark, making for a very powerful contract. The child wished 3 things of the demon. He wished for protection, he wished for complete obedience, and he wished for the demon to never tell lies. It's clear that even in his most desperate moments, this child knows he cannot trust the only savior that has come to his aid. For such a young child, he's pretty smart. I think his 3 demands of the demon also show that his desire to make a contract is not purely one for a desire of power. He desires protection. And he thinks that power is how he's going to protect himself. He thinks that power is what he needs to make sure that he is safe for the rest of however long his life is. Power is what he thinks he needs to get closure, to achieve any sort of semblance of healing or getting better or feeling safe and content. He doesn't feel power as like a greed thing. He doesn't feel the need to have power to satiate some unsated desire for power. He just wants to be safe. I sound like I'm talking about Astarion at this point, and maybe I am, but I think they're very similar characters. Every time this child refers to himself as Ciel Phantomhive, the demon laughs, as if he knows something. Ciel asks what's so funny, and the demon shares that it's ironic. Ciel ordered him to never lie, but he himself is quite the liar. How was the twin theory just a theory in English-speaking circles when this arc was literally laying it out in the open? This is so blatantly obvious. Like, the hindsight is clearer than 2020 vision. Like, how did I not pick up on this sooner? The demon muses to himself how, while this new contract may be annoying, the human lifespan is nothing but a blip to him. So, he's also ancient compared to humans. But Ciel is proving to be a challenge. He's incredibly sheltered. He's literally 10 years old. Ciel then realizes he doesn't know the demon's name. The demon tells him that it's up to him, and this is where Ciel names him Sebastian, after his family dog. Sebastian initially takes this as an insult, but I don't think it was meant as one. Dogs are seen as protectors, and that's his new role. Dogs are a very beloved part of a family, and while this child may not love or care for the demon, he still craves that connection, that familial experience. And while the demon at his side may not be a family member, he's still a source of protection. And so it makes sense to name him after the family dog. Sebastian, however, doesn't see it that way. He sees Ciel as a wicked brat from here on out. And we know that literally never changes. Per Ciel's request, Sebastian takes him to the hospital where his aunt worked. While they're there, Tanaka spots him. The first reunion. Tanaka is so shocked that he falls out of his chair and wastes no time embracing Ciel in a hug I'm sure they both needed. They have a moment of comparing stories, but no one saw who the culprits were. But I do hope talking about it helped the both of them process, even just a little bit. Tanaka then passes the Phantomhive Butler pocket watch onto Sebastian, begging him to take care of Ciel. Afterwards, Aunt Angelina is finally able to come see Ciel. She's so worried about him, but at least he's there, in front of her, alive and safe for now. He's the sole survivor. Aunt Angelina gives Ciel the signet ring, the gold one. It's the only thing left after the fire, she says. She offers for Ciel to stay the night, but he needs to go see the remnants of his old home for himself. Some sort of closure or morbid curiosity, or perhaps a combination of both. I love how this insight into Sebastian's past is really just us watching Ciel get back to his life after clawing his way through hell. The ruins of the Phantomhive Manor, charred and covered in ash, a grim reminder of all that has happened. I'm not sure what Ciel expected, but he was shocked by what he saw. He then turns to the graves, his father, his mother. There's no acknowledgement of his grave, though, just a glimpse at it. Or Ciel's grave, at least. But we know that's an empty grave, just made for the thought and closure of those who remained to grieve. Sebastian mentions that the first and only time he's ever heard Ciel refer to his parents was during this moment. As it's getting late, Sebastian starts making moves to head home. Ciel says they should go to a nearby inn, but Sebastian has other plans. He has somehow magically repaired the whole manor. No idea how he did that. Some sort of demon magic, I guess. It's not really important. The only thing that matters is that this place is now Ciel's castle. Editing Mel here, I was thinking about how Sebastian could have fixed the manor, and I think he reversed time, because Madame Red said the signet ring was the only thing left, but in a previous arc, Ciel mentioned having some of his dad's old clothes, and these old clothes could have been things from the London townhouse, but it makes more sense considering we see Sebastian's kind of demon magic here. It makes more sense to think that maybe he just kind of reversed the state of the manor and everything that was inside of it. Although I have no reason to think that other than it's just a theory. It is now time for Ciel to teach Sebastian how to take care of a human, more or less. Starting off with, if the water is too hot, it will burn him, and boiling water is far too hot for human skin. There's a huge learning curve on Sebastian's part, and not only does he have to learn to care for this particular child, but this child is also deeply traumatized, making his care a bit more complicated. He's rough with bathing Ciel at first, and Ciel does not want to be touched after all he's been through. He's done. But he's still filthy, and Sebastian has a duty to clean him for his health and his well-being. Ciel throws a tantrum, splashing water on Sebastian and yelling for him to get out. I do think that even if he's never bathed himself, Ciel is kind of old enough to figure it out, at least for tonight. He's smart, and surely he's picked up on how people have bathed him in the past, even if it wasn't directly taught to him. I think he'll be fine. Except he's not fine. He slips while trying to grab the towel. He's incredibly weak and fragile at this moment. Sebastian abandons any attempt at gentle parenting, fed up with Ciel's insistence that he doesn't need his help, despite very clearly needing his help. Hearing the detached way that Sebastian explains how humans are frail and can die from a single germ, I think goes a long way to convince Ciel to cooperate. It probably helps him see that Sebastian's not going to hurt him. He's not going to touch him in any way that would be triggering or upsetting. He's safe in that moment, and in some weird, twisted way, Sebastian's establishing himself as a safe place. His hands are nothing to worry about, and so Sebastian bathes Ciel, getting him all cleaned up and ensuring that his wounds are properly taken care of. After bath time comes dinner. Ciel is starving, and Sebastian prepares a feast at the flick of a tablecloth, but it all tastes like ass. Ciel also requests that Sebastian cut out doing the magic so casually. It's not befitting of a butler, and is highly suspicious. Ordinary butlers cannot do that, and they don't want to blow his cover. Sebastian assumes that Ciel's taste has been skewed due to his time in captivity, but this comment seems to upset Ciel, and he gets up and goes to bed without eating anything. He's going through it, and now he's got this weird creature at his side that surely isn't making things better to process or handle. Sebastian, in a moment of kindness, does bring Ciel some warm milk. He does need something in his system after all. It's a rare, sparse moment of kindness from the demon, a gentle hand for this wet cat of a child who's got the world on his shoulders, and a great amount of responsibilities he must start tending to. There's a cute moment of Ciel asking for honey, Sebastian allowing as much as he'd like, and then Ciel explaining that Tanaka usually scolded him for that, saying it'd give him cavities. Sebastian promises to follow suit starting tomorrow, allowing for this one tender moment of mercy when Ciel needed it most. There's a bit of resolve here, and we can start to see the mask that Ciel wears for most of the series slipping into place. After drinking the milk, Ciel compliments Sebastian, something he almost never does and would never do again, for the most part. But he then states that he wouldn't forgive Sebastian if breakfast was terrible in the morning. They had to get serious, and Sebastian was now duty-bound to be the best butler he could be, even if it is for a little brat like Ciel. Sebastian really does need to learn how to be a human, or at least human-passing enough, because the locals have noticed that the Phantom Hive Manor is suddenly back up like new overnight. It's weird, it's impossible, it's strange. It's hard for Sebastian to get things right at first. He has to depend on recipes and Ciel's own guidance until he can gain an understanding as to what will work best, what flavors please Ciel. They've got their work cut out for them, and Sebastian also has to get Ciel up to speed on his studies, and beyond, honestly, if he is to compete with adults. Ciel also has much to learn about the Phantom Hives and his future duties, since he wasn't able to learn them from his father, either because his father was busy teaching the other son, or because they were literally 10 years old, although we do see in future chapters that Vincent was starting to teach Ciel about some stuff. but again, they were like 10, so they didn't get that into it. Sebastian warns Ciel that polite society is full of those who wish to take advantage of him, so he must carry himself with a level of intelligence and wisdom that he still has to learn. But Ciel doesn't want to bring others into the manor, not yet at least, meaning that teaching goes to Sebastian. Part of me thinks that the reason Ciel didn't want Sebastian to bring in their old teacher was because he didn't want some of the old people in his life around that may be able to figure out he's not who he says he is. I think he's afraid of getting caught in some way, but he's willing to risk it for his family because that's his family. And he's also, we do see, willing to risk it for Tanaka because we all know Tanaka comes back. Although I do think, and I think most people in the fandom think, that Tanaka was aware of who Ciel was from the beginning. Tanaka pretty much raised the Phantom Hive twins. Like, he was a big part of their lives. I think he would have known. And I think a lot of Ciel's family did know, but they didn't want to say anything to him about it because it's a very awkward and uncomfortable situation. And I've also heard the theory that that's what he was supposed to do. If something ever happened to Ciel, the real one, the twin was supposed to step up in his place, although there's not a lot of canonical evidence for that. But it is very interesting to think about and could further prove why no one said anything, despite probably knowing that something wasn't as it seemed. Anyway, Sebastian now gets to play as a tutor. Ciel admits that they're both only imitations of what they claim to be, and together they must work hard until they become the real things. Ciel's got to learn how to be Ciel, and also how to be an Earl at the tender age of 10 years old. Sebastian is a harsh teacher, however. He did warn Ciel and the reader that he was quite strict, but honestly his methods seem a bit cruel. However, I am aware that this type of treatment was more normalized back then. At least it's depicted as such in media. However, Ciel is a quick learner. Maybe not in the ways that Sebastian had intended or expected. He mirrors Sebastian's teaching techniques, both as a form of revenge, probably, and maintaining authority over the demon Butler, but I also think he's picking it up thinking that's just how you teach people. Ciel is 10. What does he know about teaching anyone anything? So it only makes sense that he'd mimic whatever teacher figure he's got, and right now that's the harsh actions of a demon. They're both picky with one another, although Ciel takes the cake here. But if they are to entertain guests in the future, Sebastian does need to learn to be nitpicky with how the food is presented. Honestly, this explains everything about the Butler persona we've gotten to know thus far. During the horseback riding lessons, Sebastian gives Ciel some advice. When dealing with beasts, any hesitation means you've lost already. Ciel must act with dignity since he is the master. I know this was speaking about the horse and animals in general, however, I believe in a way, Sebastian was talking about himself, and I believe Ciel took this to heart when dealing with the demon as well. The demon is also a beast to him, and he must act with a certain level of dignity and assert his dominance as the master to keep the beast in check. We've seen that most of the time. That's how Ciel acts around Sebastian, aside from the more vulnerable moments spurred on by great distress. Once they are done learning for the day, Sebastian has to fend off attackers while Ciel tries to sleep. But it's loud and disruptive. Sebastian has to learn how to handle things quickly and quietly so as to not disturb Ciel's sleep. Where have we seen this similar sentiment before? Perhaps in the circus arc when Lizzie was spending the night? We know the other servants operate under the same philosophy, so I think they learned that from Sebastian because Ciel really wanted Sebastian to learn that. It's all full circle here. However, at the end of the day, especially back when Sebastian was still new, Ciel is still an incredibly traumatized child, and he's going to have nightmares, fears, anxieties. Everyone over there is dead and glaring at him. Sebastian doesn't know what he means, assuring him that no one else is in the manor, but I think that's his survivor's guilt talking, and he's talking about his dead family. Ciel struggles throughout the whole story with survivor's guilt, both, currently where we're at in these deep dives and also in the present of the manga. Nightmares of his brother being angry with him for surviving, for taking his identity. Ciel yearns for comfort, but he doesn't want anyone to touch him. Not now, not after everything. While he's dealing with this, he knows Sebastian is trustworthy enough, if only because of their contract. He needs a protective figure by his side, someone who can fend off the nightmares. Despite it all, he asks Sebastian to stay. Perhaps the presence of another is comforting to him, helps ground him in the present. And so Sebastian stands a safe distance away until Ciel falls asleep. Something that we do see Ciel request at least a couple times in the manga. As time goes on, the pair improves. Ciel is excelling in his studies, Sebastian is preparing tea and food like a pro, Ciel is adept at horseback riding and hunting, and Sebastian has the perfect, quiet lethality fit for the Phantom Hive household. It's only a matter of time before Ciel is ready to be appointed the title of Earl and take on all the new duties that come along with the Phantom Hive household. March 17th is the date. We don't get a specific year, but it seems like it's only a few months after Ciel was in the cage. In just a few short months, Ciel has worked to become an Earl, and Sebastian has worked to become the perfect butler. There's a short conversation about Ciel's branding scar. It doesn't cause physical pain anymore, but the emotional damage is still pretty raw. There's fury that's been embedded within him with this constant reminder of what he's been through. Sebastian considers it to not be a bad thing, though. After all, it is this fury that will drive Ciel to complete his end of the contract and allow for Sebastian to have a delectably delicious soul at the end of the day. Witnesses of Ciel's appointment believe that even if he is a Phantom Hive, a boy as young as he shouldn't be given the title of Earl just yet. He's literally 10 years old. Historically, adults have not liked when children were given positions of power. It's just kind of weird to do, and most of the time these kids become stripped of their childhoods. It's a little cruel and inhumane, and they're thrown to the wolves, metaphorically speaking. Or these kids are just a placeholder while an adult in their lives run things behind the scenes. Both of these situations are not super great for anyone involved. So it's understandable why people are concerned about Ciel, but it doesn't matter. His childhood has effectively already been stripped from him, and all that's left for him to do is attain his status so that he can start working on achieving his goal of revenge. Sebastian tries to tempt him into giving up, though. Give up on his end of the contract, and Sebastian can eat his soul right there, right now. But it doesn't work. He almost gets him, or at least he thinks he does, but Ciel is steadfast in his promise to achieve revenge. He has not lost sight of what he thinks he wants more than anything. He will achieve that closure that he craves. He did not come back to be happy. The title, the status, all that does is push him to move forward. He swears on his baneful name that he will have his revenge. Mind in the abyss, his body rushing after it. Ciel has turned his back to the light and is foolishly running to his own demise. It's beautiful to Sebastian, like how a well-made meal is beautiful to humans. Ciel vows to get revenge with Sebastian at his side, and Sebastian vows to bring him victory. Sebastian thinks to himself about how the sorrow and despair will flavor Ciel's soul to perfection. All of the loss, all of the trauma. It's like spices. We see a glimpse of horrific things from the manga thus far playing in Sebastian's record. Things that flavor Ciel's soul, in my opinion. And then we're back to the present. To Sebastian, gravely injured. Ciel flying off into the distance, just out of reach. Things are not looking good for the doomed duo here. Sebastian is frantically trying to hold on to his perfectly crafted dinner. More beast than human in this moment. Everything is at risk of vanishing. He is at risk of dying. But just as things seemed to be hopeless, Sebastian is able to push himself forward and connect with Ciel, grasping his hand and, at the very least, ensuring Ciel doesn't fall to his doom. Hand in hand, Ciel has been saved, but they are not truly safe. Not with Undertaker afoot. not with the undead creatures around, and surely not with the ship sinking. For one reason or another, Undertaker does care about Ciel, but he only calls him the Earl. I hadn't noticed until now, but have we ever seen Undertaker call Ciel Ciel? I don't think we have, but I think I know why. But I'm not gonna tell you guys until it becomes relevant a little bit later in the series. It's twin stuff, by the way. I think Undertaker knows. Undertaker comments on how entertaining Sebastian's cinematic record was, but he's deemed Sebastian a threat to Ciel, which, in a manner of speaking, is true. Sebastian will ultimately be the one to doom Ciel at the end of the day, taking his soul and eating it and ending his life, pretty much. So Undertaker wants to make Sebastian disappear. He cares, in his own way, what happens to the Earl of Phantomhive. The ship has now tipped and is actively sinking. Ryan Stoker falls and dies. He really was just a red herring and cannon fodder for the story, nothing more. Rest in peace to all the Ryan Stoker fans out there. I know there's at least like one of you. The fight still goes on. Grell and Ronald are in pretty okay shape, but Sebastian is looking worse for wear. He's not really in any condition to be fighting, especially when he's duty-bound to protect Ciel amongst this chaos. But he can still fight against Ronald. He has to. Grell is taking on Undertaker, and Ronald has decided to put Sebastian out of his misery. But can this duo really accomplish their goals? Despite his injuries, Sebastian still has some fight left in him, and he easily overpowers Ronald. Or at least he makes it look easy. How can a demon this close to having died be so cool in a fight still? Undertaker recognizes Grell as the person pretending to be Madame Red's butler earlier on. He reveals that he knew from the start Grell's true identity. That Grell was not hiding their presence as a Reaper very well, if they were at all. Did I just decide Grell is a she/they? I've been defaulting to they/them pronouns for, everything. There's a moment of him trying to connect with Grell. They've both been seduced by the lives of the living. I know at this point in the series, we don't know how Reapers come to be Reapers, but I feel this curiosity for mortal lives and the desire to intermingle is very human of them. Whether it's a means to humanize these non-human creatures or a hint to their true nature, I think it could be a bit of both. Despite how I talk about the creaturification of Sebastian, I am a big believer in the empathy and humanity of non-human creatures in media. We're all learning what it means to be human here, even those who aren't technically human. It's a very, very common theme. In one of my film classes, I believe it was one of the script writing ones I had, my professor talked about how every piece of media out there is just telling a story about what it means to be human. Even Cars, like the Cars movie, where they're all cars, that's just a story about being human. That's all we do, is just tell stories about humanity and being human and what it means to us. After defeating Ronald, Sebastian comments on how weak the youth are today and how it's old-fashioned to depend so much on their death scythe. I find this really interesting, actually. We've seen that Grell wields her scythe in battle pretty heavily, and once it's rendered useless, she loses her bite. But Grell is never presented as being overly youthful. Not the way that Ronald is. It's pointed out that Ronald is young, perhaps newer to the Reaper society. I believe with Reapers, their age isn't exactly tied to their physical forms. I believe their physical forms may be more related to where they were at when they became Reapers, but amongst Reapers, the younger ones would be the newer ones. Ronald is a new hire, basically, and this emphasis on him being young but also old-fashioned, Reapers in general depending so much on their scythe, Sebastian has fought Grell and knows that without their scythe, they're kind of useless. So maybe they should learn how to fight better? I don't know, get good. That's basically what he's saying here. Anyway, the ship is sinking! Undertaker's done here and ready to leave. Both Sebastian and Grell lunge towards him in one last-ditch effort to accomplish their goals, but he doesn't attack. He dodges, but he doesn't strike back. Undertaker sets his sights on Ciel. He tosses him the lockets that we've seen on him before. We've seen earlier that these hold some sort of significance to him. Undertaker and Ciel lock eyes as Ciel grabs the lockets. Undertaker is entrusting these to the Earl, but he asks that Ciel take good care of them because that is his treasure. "Let's meet again," he says before making his escape, and now Undertaker is firmly established as some sort of antagonistic force within Black Butler. So the ship is done for. It's split in two. The sinking of the ship is pretty identical to the Titanic, I think. This is literally Yana Toboso's take on the Titanic movie, or like the real historical event. I wonder if she liked the movie, if she was like a fan, or if this was just a fun pop culture reference. Given the fact that the reference is the entire arc, I'm willing to bet she enjoyed the movie, or like at least enjoyed the story behind the real shipwreck in real life. Maybe enjoyed isn't the best word to use on that one. Despite the odds being stacked against them, Sebastian and Ciel make it out alive. Although I'm not sure if Ciel is happy about this. One last act to ensure his safety. Sebastian sticks him in a life raft and just throws him into the ocean. Kind of like that one scene in season 1 where Sebastian just throws Ciel like he's throwing an American football or something like that. It's time to start tying up all the loose ends and cleaning things up around here. So William makes his appearance to retrieve Grell from the waters. Everyone can now sigh in relief. The fan favorite Stoic Reaper is back for just a moment. And he also grabs Ronald from wherever he was. Typical Grell comedic relief flirting moment, but there's still so much work to do, so it kind of gets brushed off. More souls to clean up, reports on the transgressor to be made. These Reapers really have so much to do, and Undertaker has really caused some problems, both for the mortal world and the Reaper world. Rest in peace, Grell and Ronald, you guys worked hard, and the grind does not stop for you guys. In case you forgot, Ciel was but a small little boy. He's so tiny the life raft is unable to hold him. He slips right through, exhausted and at risk of drowning. He is conscious, but his body won't move. He's beyond exhausted. He's reached his limits. But Sebastian is able to swoop in just in time. This also feels like the ending of season 1 of the anime just a bit. Count how many times Ciel is drowned or almost drowned in a piece of Black Butler media. Repeats of the Campania, almost drowning, don't count, but I think we can maybe count chapter covers, because there's a couple chapter covers in the Western arc of Ciel underwater like this. Yana, what are you trying to say here? Sebastian has been able to secure a raft, though, hoisting Ciel up into it. That child did swallow a lot of water, though, and he now has to cough that up. I'm sure his asthma is not happy with him right now. Out on the open waters, it's horrifying, actually. They're surrounded by the screams of those trying to survive, the sounds of people begging for help, and eventually the deafening silence as these people drown. Sebastian tells Ciel that they can't go back because their boat will be drugged down, risking their own lives. And this may seem like a statement just made in general, but I think he said this because he knows Ciel wanted to help them. He's looking out towards the sound, the knowledge of what horrors those people must be going through right now. I do think Ciel is kind at heart. I say that all the time. And I think Ciel has this drive to help others. That's why he feels so guilty when he ends up failing people, like the victim of Jack the Ripper that he could have prevented but used as bait instead. Sebastian wouldn't have said that if Ciel didn't have a desire to go back and help those people. He just wants to help people. He's so sweet and kind. So they sit alone on the boat. Ciel is ready for a nap, but Sebastian is frantic to keep him awake. He mustn't fall asleep. He might die. It's at that moment that Sebastian is attacked by an undead creature. This isn't over yet. Those corpses are still alive in the water, seeking souls, and they are surrounded. heads popping up out of the water all around them, closing in. It's truly horrifying. Ciel demands that Sebastian get in the boat. I assume he had been swimming in the water to move the little boat, but also because he felt it'd be improper for a servant to sit in the same boat as their master. We saw a similar thought process when he apologized for riding in the same box as Ciel on the train at the end of the circus arc. So, there's that. But also, now is not the time for such silly little frivolous manners. So Sebastian gets in the boat and uses the oars to fight off the corpses. They will search for souls until the bodies can't move anymore, and Ciel is the only living soul around. He can't run. He can't risk tracking these things back to Lizzie and his family, to the innocent people that have miraculously survived. Ciel seems to think that he must sacrifice himself to protect those important to him, and to protect the greater good. But don't be fooled, this isn't a sacrifice of him laying down his life, although it may look that way and could definitely end up that way. If he felt that way in this moment, I think Sebastian could just turn around and eat his soul and then be done with the whole ordeal. Ciel still has resolve and a will to live. He's just using himself as bait and orders Sebastian to fight them off. The demon can do that much at least. So Ciel's fine. He knows he's not risking his life. Like, he's risking his life, but he knows it'll work out. Or at least he hopes it will. The odds are very likely that it will. Sebastian fights off the corpses, commenting how even in death, humans will still claw one another down to get what they want. Black Butler has a very interesting philosophy on what it means to be human. Through our main duo, we explore the darker sides of humanity, mostly the greed and corruption. If you just take them into account, humanity is a cesspool, worse than demons. And more often than not, that's the stance the series as a whole takes. Yana Toboso isn't writing this story to explore the beauties of being human. She's writing it to explore the dark underbellies of power and corruption and what that does to our humanity. But Black Butler still shows us that there's more to being human than that. We have kindness, and we see that beauty of life through characters like Lizzie, Soma, and Agni, and the Phantom Hive servants. They are the beacons amongst the darkness caused by the desires of the rich and powerful. We see Snake and the Midfords being very concerned for Ciel. Edward wants to go back to check for more survivors. They can still hear the voices, but the staff rowing the boats say it's too dangerous. They don't want to risk the lives of everyone that's already safe for the chance that there are more survivors out there. They saved who they could. It's a tough decision to make, honestly, but one I understand. Why risk killing everyone for the slim opportunity of saving more people when you can just cash in the people you've already saved and know that at least at the end of the day, you did something and somebody survived? Ciel and Sebastian will be okay, though. They have plot armor, and Sebastian was able to fight off every last one of the undead corpses. They litter the ocean, showing the carnage. But now that the adrenaline has run its course, Sebastian is faced with the gravity of his own injuries, collapsing in such a way that even Ciel is concerned for him. And we see that Sebastian is also scared for his life. He knows now that Undertaker will not harm Ciel, and that they'll likely meet him again, but he doesn't want to see Undertaker again. Undertaker almost killed him. And given the way Sebastian loves to show off, and how his encounter with Grell earlier in the series was his first time being around Reapers, it's safe to say Sebastian may have never had a brush with death like this before. This may be the very first time in his life that his life was threatened. And that's terrifying for any creature, but even more so for one who was once thought to be pretty invincible. Just as things seemed grim, a rescue ship is seen out on the horizon. They will be okay. Ciel tells Sebastian to get some rest and that he did well, dropping the hostile walls and banter they usually share, showing a moment of genuine concern for the demon at his side. This is probably the first time Ciel has ever felt anything like that for Sebastian. I believe his feelings towards the demon are usually more in the disdain and resentment field. I think their familial bonds are mostly surface level, and that while Ciel may have grown used to Sebastian's company and does seem to enjoy it sometimes, at the end of the day, he probably still feels negatively towards the creature who devoured his brother's soul, and the creature that will ultimately bring him his doom. But Sebastian is also his trusted weapon and his key to achieving the goals that he set for himself. So it's kind of a complicated relationship on Ciel's end, a double-edged sword, if you will. Sebastian shares a bit of surprise that Ciel is sharing such words with him, showing a kindness I'm sure the child almost never extends towards the demon. He asks Ciel to stop. He doesn't want to encounter a storm. Things are finally looking up for them on this mission. Back home from the disaster cruise, it's time for the Phantom Fam and friends to celebrate Easter. Yes, this is the lighthearted breather chapter between arcs, but it's really important for the plot as well. I told y'all these breather filler chapters added a lot of character depth, and this one in particular is incredibly important for understanding characters later on when the overarching plot twists start rolling in. I want to point out right here, right now, that the survivors of the horrid cruise shared their stories of the creatures, but they were silenced. News making speculations and reporting on other aspects of the tragedy. If the Double Charles were involved, and the Queen as well, as I suspect, I imagine they'd do what they can to keep people quiet about the truth, especially if it's supposed to be some sort of experimental secret weapon for war. So you could imagine why the Queen or the Double Charles would have been very, hush-hush about it all and making sure people didn't spread the word. Sebastian teases Ciel about how his first voyage out to sea was more or less a disaster, and he got sick when they returned home as icing on top of this misery cake. But things are finally able to return to normal. Except for Sebastian embracing his furry side. Bunny ears. It's Easter! The servants, Lizzie and Edward, and Soma and Agni, and also Nina Hopkins, are all there and ready to celebrate the holiday with their favorite brooding 13-year-old. This chapter is super cute, and I will be glossing over the actions in favor of focusing on the implications, alright? I do find it so cute that despite not believing in the Christian faith or the Christian God, Soma is ready to learn and participate as a way to bond with his friends. Soma, never change, you sweet, precious, kind-hearted soul. Sebastian explains the custom of Easter, and with the help of Lizzie, the group decide to don new spring outfits, courtesy of Nina, and they also host an Easter egg hunt. This chapter kind of just starts out as Yana Toboso putting her little guys in situations. Lizzie brought eggs that her father made, and one in particular stokes a bit of nostalgia for her. She asks Ciel if the pattern on the egg takes him back. He has no idea what she's talking about, though. This strikes Lizzie as odd, but she doesn't say anything. She's paying attention, though. Her watchful eyes on her beloved, looking for signs. Signs of what, though? I'm not sure if even Lizzie herself knows at this point. Signs that he's okay, maybe? Signs of the trauma she can only imagine he's undergone? Signs that he is the Phantom Hive twin that he says he is? Things don't entirely add up, but she keeps quiet about it. There's a simple explanation. He just went through a lot during that month, and it changed him. And that's not a lie. It's absolutely the truth. He had been changed. Ciel deflects. He may not know what exactly she's talking about, but he can make a guess. He says he'll ask the servants to hide the eggs, assuming that she was just talking about egg hunting, and when they were younger, at that. Lizzie does her best to sweep the awkward moment under the rug, picking up a new egg that she had made herself and declaring it the egg to find if they want to win. She talks about how Ciel was always the first to find the special egg when they were younger, and she expects him to find it this time too. He hesitates, but he says that he will. He's looking a bit uncomfortable, out of his element, but he's surrounded by the people he cares the most for, people that he's really comfortable with. Anyway, Double Charles' appearance, because I think they're some kind of fan favorites or something, and they get bunched in with the kids despite being in their early to mid-20s. There's a cute moment where Charles Gray, the murderer from the murder arc, remarks that Sebastian is still alive, and Sebastian thanks him for the occasion, a really funny reference to that previous arc. Anyway, they establish the rules of the egg hunt. The hunters gotta hold a raw egg on a spoon while they hunt, and if the egg breaks in any way, they are disqualified. And they work in teams of 2. We've got Ciel and Sebastian, the double Charles, Soma and Agni, Mayrin and Bard, Finny and Snake, and Edward with Nina. Lizzie is not hunting. Nina is Nina, and that flusters Edward. Mayrin is able to use the distraction to shoot their egg with a slingshot. Phantom Fam fights dirty. Bard blows up, disqualifying he and Mayrin. Snakes get charmed, and that shocks him and he passes out and breaks their egg. Ciel is afraid of blowing up to one of Bard's special eggs, a moment that I think is really funny. Agni uses this distraction to attack, but Sebastian is able to save the day. Ciel fakes an asthma attack to lure Soma in, and then he pushes Soma's egg onto the ground. Evil, evil child. Soma and Agni are more relieved, though, that he's okay than they are mad that he played dirty, and the fact that they just brush over that Ciel kind of lied to cheat is so funny, and after they walk away, Sebastian's like, how does it make you feel? Doesn't that just make you feel great that you cheated and then they were like so concerned about your well-being? Anyway, Ciel and Sebastian find Lizzie's egg atop the chandelier. The double Charles, the only remaining team, step in to stop Ciel from getting it, their final opponent. And I think this might be foreshadowing to the Queen and her butlers being the big bad, or at least something very antagonistic and important for the plot. Do you guys remember how in season 1 of the anime, the Queen and her butler were the big bad? I know I've brought this up before. They were the ones behind the attack in the Phantom Hive Manor in the anime, and I believe that the manga will parallel that. I know it's a little silly to base that theory on an anime that's largely non-canon, and any references to actual canon are so twisted up and buried under layers of creative liberties. I can't explain the full depth of my theory here, but I trust I will as it becomes more relevant to the story arcs as we discuss. But I can't stop thinking about how the double Charles were interested in making the corpses, the bizarre dolls, into super soldiers. So the Queen is definitely cooking something with that. And they are really out here working with Undertaker. Anyway, this whole thing reminds me of Ashlanders and his dynamic with Queen Victoria in the anime and how they were kind of the big bads. And I think maybe the double Charles, as much as they keep showing up, they're probably going to end up being pretty important for that. Back to the Easter egg hunt. Charles, and Sebastian have a heated battle. Well, Sebastian isn't fighting back despite Ciel giving him permission to fight the nobles, but the double Charles become disqualified anyway when their egg hatches. Yeah. Now Sebastian's countdown makes sense. The very countdown that happened in the ending of season 1 of the anime, might I add. Young master, hold on for 10 seconds. Countdown as action happens and Ciel is left hanging quite literally. Where have I heard this before? Ciel wins the Easter egg hunt. Lizzie is happy. He's able to pretend that he remembers the old times that totally happened with him and not his twin brother. Lizzie is not fooled, though. She's just too kind to say anything to his face about it. They've celebrated Easter many times, but this is the first year she made an egg herself. Just what happened to Ciel? Why can't he remember? Why does he not seem to realize? Is his head full of other things? Did the trauma cause him to forget? Questions left unsaid, but I'm sure weigh down on Lizzie's mind. She knows something has happened and Ciel came back wrong. Or perhaps the wrong Ciel came back. Okay, so final thoughts, hear me out. I do not think Undertaker is the big bad that he's just been established to be. The series from here on out, at the very least where we are in the Blue Revenge arc at the time of this video, Undertaker is the main antagonistic force, the mastermind behind the Campania arc, a huge role in pretty much every arc after this, except for the Green Witch arc, I think. But I think the Undertaker's involvement is more of a red herring. There's more puzzle pieces just out of grasp. We've seen that he doesn't want to hurt the Phantom Hives. He mourns the loss of previous Phantom Hives. He's not a threat to the Phantom Hive family. However, he's currently in opposition to Ciel and Sebastian. While he is definitely in cahoots with the Queen and the Double Charles when it comes to making these bizarre dolls, he has his own personal motives for this, and he's just working with whoever will let him get it done. I firmly believe that's what's going on here. He, for all intents and purposes, is just kind of vibing, and it just so happens to be that that has made him the antagonist. Also, the twin foreshadowing in this arc was wild. I'll admit it's stuff I missed or glossed over until I reread this arc for this video, but it's very blatant. Blatant, but still subtle and easy to miss if you're not careful or thinking about it, I guess. It's genius foreshadowing, and my favorite kind. I love when you can reread something and everything just takes on a whole new meaning because it's foreshadowing that you didn't pick up on because you didn't know that the shadows were there. Anyway. I think it's fun. It's great. I love it. I will not shut up about it. The Campania arc has never been my favorite, but there's so much to chew on and appreciate about it. I loved the fast-paced nature and the way that things stacked up until we thought that maybe, just maybe, this unstoppable Butler isn't as unstoppable as we thought. The exploration of Lizzie's character and the emphasis on basically her struggle with misogyny and the reveal that she's actually a very thoughtful person. Sure, she has her more selfish moments, but we now know that a lot of her childish behavior is more of a front to make Ciel feel more at home and more normal to keep the peace. She's doing what she can to make him happy and to make him feel safe. I also love the way that they both strive to keep one another safe, both seeing the other as someone in need of protection. Their dynamics with one another are two sides of the same coin. They each know the horrors, albeit different ones. They both secretly have the power to overcome obstacles and ensure the safety of their loved ones. They both care deeply about the weird kid that's their cousin and now betrothed. Ciel and Lizzie are very alike, although I don't think they'll ever realize just how similar they are to one another. It's still a very interesting way to they're almost like narrative foils, I think. No, I don't think I'm using that correctly. They're very similar in a way that I find very endearing, and they care so much about each other, and I love that. They both need that. The Campania arc is where I think the overall plot of Black Butler really starts to take off. I'm not saying every arc before this wasn't contributing to the overall story. It built up character, it established necessary information and world building, and it brought necessary players onto the field. But this is the first story arc that, as far as we know right now, obviously ties into just about every arc that follows. This is the arc that throws everything into motion. It's hard to explain the full scope of things since the overall story is very much ongoing and everything relating to the Bizarre Dolls are still very much ongoing, but I'm confident in the fact that this story arc was the spark to the flames that have been building and will continue to build until we reach the end of the story at large. More so than the previous arcs before this one. They're all important though, so don't be a part skipper, but if you're watching these videos, you've probably already read or watched all the previous arcs, so no one's skipping anything. Anyway, I believe that's it for me. Thank you for watching. I hope this lived up to your expectations. I know a lot of you guys are very eager for me to get to this arc. I will see you all next time in the halls of Weston College.